Interstate spur routes. Three-digit highways that branch off of major interstates, mostly in large metropolitan areas. These spur routes are pretty simple, a lot of the time just serving downtowns or other points of interest off of the main interstate. They serve an important purpose with funding and connectivity, so today I wanted to talk specifically about them. In this video, we'll go over the 5 longest interstate spur routes, and go a little in depth on all of them to see why they're there and how they got there. Before this video starts though, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. We're trying to grow and reach 100,000 subscribers as soon as possible. So just simply clicking the subscribe button helps me out a ton, and you won't miss any future geography uploads. Thank you. So before we get into our list, let's go over the rules for interstate spur route numbering, just to get a bit more knowledge on what they are. So all spur routes have a 3-digit numbering. That's the best way to identify them. This numbering is supposed to be the interstate that they're spurring off of, with a digit placed in front of it. An example would be I-180 in Illinois, which comes off of I-80, so it just has a 1 placed in front of it. Now, it gets a bit more complicated than this. There can only be one of each numbering in every state, so if there's another spur route off of I-80 in Illinois, it would need a higher digit, like I-280. There's also a rhyme or reason to the preceding digit. An odd number means that the spur stretches off of the parent interstate, ending in some other area and not reconnecting. If the digit is even, that means it's a loop, and will end up linking back to the parent interstate. This can bring us back to our example of I-280, which ends up coming back into I-80 on the other end of the Quad Cities metro. Now, though those are very basic rules, that doesn't mean they're followed. There are many numbering violations in the spur route numbering system, so it's really just a suggestion, as is most of the interstate rules and guidelines. So now let's get into the list and talk about our 5th place highway. So in 5th place is Interstate 275, located in Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. This is an 83.7 mile spur route off of I-75, which travels north to south through the Cincinnati area, where our spur is located. So this is a loop, stretching all the way around the metropolitan area, being completed through 3 separate states and serving many cities, including Covington, Sharonville, Springdale, and more. This loop is known as the longest freeway loop to be completed in the US, so it's actually a very important and interesting feat. It was built early on, with construction taking place between 1958 and 1979, meaning it was very recent after the inception of the interstate system. At the time, the area was not as populated, and most of the portions in Ohio as well as Indiana just affected farmland, with no major urban area being affected at that point in time. It was just a massive project, and felt very ahead for its time. Next up, we have I-135 in Kansas. Now, this is one of our more rural highways on the list, stretching 95.7 miles from Wichita to Salina in the central part of the state. This works as an important spur route from I-35, continuing north instead of working its way northeast towards Kansas City. The route was started in 1968, continuing through the early 1970s. The highway also serves downtown Wichita, which is important because that's the most expensive part of the highway and the most difficult to build, being called the canal route through the city as it takes the route of a canal, which sits between the median of the north and southbound lanes. This is only around a 2-mile section, but it cost the state $32 million, and it wasn't completed until 1979. Now, originally, it had the I-35 West designation, as it served as really just a western route for travelers on I-35. But it was eventually changed to I-135, which it has stayed as since. Moving on, next we have Interstate 287 in New York and New Jersey. This is an extremely important 98.7 mile route in the New York City metropolitan area, serving as a half beltway bypass around the main city. It starts south of the city near Edison or Amboy, moving west into the outer parts of the metro in New Jersey, passing through places like Morristown and Parsippany. It then continues to the New York border before turning east towards the Hudson River at the Mario Cuomo Bridge. After that, it moves past White Plains and finally ends at I-95, where it started. Now, if you ask me, it should be a spur route of I-95, since that's the start and end. But again, I've said that the numbering is really just a suggestion. Now, into the history, the plan for I-287 actually predates the interstate system, with a proposal for the bypass originating around 1950. It did end up getting built as part of the system, though, being mostly finished in New Jersey around the mid-1970s. But there was a large portion in the north that was delayed due to backlash. But they finally agreed on the current alignment in 1982. Construction didn't start until 1988 though, and it wasn't completed until 1994, meaning the northern portion is actually fairly new as far as massive highways go. This highway has ended up serving a lot of traffic and changed the area significantly, helping small towns on its route boom in population and economy. Now, the highway has been part of a conversation for the bridge or tunnel across the Long Island Sound, as it ends in a location that would make it very easy. So that could add almost 20 miles in the future if it were ever somehow finished. Now, that likely won't happen, but it is a possibility. Next, we move to our number 2 spot, where we find another large metropolitan area bypass or half beltway. This being I-495 up north in Massachusetts, a massive 122-mile-long highway from the northern tip of the state straight into Cape Cod. Now, this is, in my opinion, still just a half beltway around the coastal city of Boston. It's just a very spread out metro on the outskirts, with there still being a lot of population despite the lack of large suburbs. The highway does pass through some important exurbs though, with Lawrence, Lowell, Marlborough, and more. It also passes between Worcester and Framingham, serving both cities in a way. The idea for this highway dates back to the 1940s, when an outer highway around Boston was proposed. A part of the highway was completed in the 50s and 60s in the south, and most of the rest of the highway was then built around and throughout the 60s. It was fully finished in 1982, after a short segment between Foxborough and I-95 was finally completed. This is yet another one that is very important to the area, serving major traffic volumes and being a main connector for anyone in the outer Boston area. Finally, moving to first place, we have the longest interstate spur route in the country, this being I-476 in Pennsylvania. So this is an 132.1 mile long spur route, stretching across the eastern part of the state. It starts down in Philadelphia, west of the main city, at an interchange with I-95. Moving north, it slithers through the metropolitan area past Conshohocken and King of Prussia before leaving the metropolitan area. Outside of Philly, it passes through the Allentown area before hitting the edge of the Blue Mountains. It does continue through the mountains, though, despite the difficult terrain. It pushes past I-80 near the Poconos, and then moves up into the Scranton area, where it finally terminates at a strange interchange with I-81 and US 11. This is a long route that could very easily be its own 2-digit interstate, or an extension of any current interstate that ends in Philadelphia. So parts of this highway have been in the works for almost a century, with an original plan for the Mid-County Expressway in 1929, working with the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It was a very controversial highway though. It was finally actually constructed in 1967, but this construction would take decades due to conflict between the Pennsylvania DOT and several communities on the planned path. This resulted in problems like portions of the highway being built and completed unconnected from other portions, as they waited for other towns to approve the plans. Now, construction in the north was a whole nother beast, with environmental impact and very difficult terrain for building. This was originally built as Pennsylvania State Highway 9, but it was switched to I-476 in 1996, which is very recent. But those are all the highways on the list today. I think it's very interesting to look at the longest spur routes, because they all have interesting stories and reasons for being there, and serve important purposes to their area. Thanks for watching. Thank you to the members this week: Makito Martinoff, Kurt Ainsley, Yoshifu, Jerome McCall, Haystack, KMS162, JL, Sir JC17, Bryson, Dominic Psyche, Rosebud 4, Jeremy Jarvis, Christopher DeAngelis, Darkbird, Big Pasty, Jeremy Crone, Wolfling73, Snyder Swine, Ford Jake, Benjamin Whitings, Ryan Devins, and Hazev the Wolf. I appreciate you all so much. You help out the channel a ton. If you want to become a member, the link is down in the description below. I'm getting really close to college now, coming into this next semester. So if you want to help me out financially, this is the best way to do it. Thank you.